Nutrition conversations just happen very casually with you're out with friends or whatever. And I'm like, no, like, you don't drink the apple cider vinegar. You have to spin upside down 3 times on your head to get rid of hiccups. Try that instead. Or, drinking a glass of milk while you're standing on one foot. Like, that's how quickly all of a sudden a casual conversation can end up down misinformation. Like it.
Are you spreading misinformation? You know what I've heard before is that apple cider vinegar is a cure for acid reflux. So that makes sense. Throw in some more acid there, yeah?
Asterisk might not actually be accurate physiology.
Welcome back to another episode of A Plateful of Insights. I am your host for today, Andrea Shacklin. I'm a registered dietitian with Revive Wellness. And I am joined today with two of my awesome colleagues, both dietitians. And today we are going to be talking about the wellness influencers. After coming off watching the series Netflix, Apple Cider Vinegar, there was a lot of pieces as a dietitian team that we thought we could speak to. And if you've tuned into any of our other episodes, we also have talked quite a bit about misinformation and how it spreads. And this just, we thought was a perfect way to kind of bring it all together. Into how this works. So today we're going to talk about, misinformation, how it spreads, the lure of influencers, why we're drawn to it, and then the kind of going into the dangers, and then how do we navigate something like this. So excited about all the things we're going to talk about. Let's get in. For those who maybe are listening who haven't watched it, just a really quick, brief recap of what it is. It is based on an influencer who in real life in Australia was using kind of a false diagnosis, and then that turned into kind of the overselling of alternative medicine and kind of the stories behind that, and how maybe the mistrust of medical information, and then into exploring the alternative medicine field. So that is kind of what we're talking about. If you haven't watched it, it is on, but it's called Apple Cider Vinegar. That's what we are talking about. So I guess let's jump right in on the piece around wellness influencers. As dietitians, we're in that space. We're constantly talking about nutrition, but there's this whole other field of people who also talk about it, who maybe don't have the same credentials. So yeah, maybe why are people drawn to these wellness influencers? Let's start there.
I think I can start. Kind of like you said, Andrea, we as dietitians, and we're kind of in the media space, we have the potential to be kind of in that wellness media area at least, but also kind of fall sort of under that category, I guess, of wellness influencers. But the important part to mention about that is that it's not a regulated term by any means. So there's no saying that the things that these wellness influencers are saying is necessarily true, based in evidence, which as registered dietitians, that's what we're required to do. They can kind of make all types of claims, things that sound a lot more hopeful, a lot more beneficial than what we are always able to advise upon that's actually based in facts, that actually has evidence for it. So it's a lot more fun to follow some of those claims because it just sounds more hopeful. It sounds like it's going to change your life, whereas sometimes some of those interventions that we can recommend that maybe have an evidence-based effect, but to a lesser degree, it's just not quite as appealing or sexy, I guess I would say. It's just people don't want the facts all the time sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's not as exciting, which people want to be able to believe in something and have a community, and they want to latch onto something that they feel like will have an impact on their lives. And a lot of times scientific evidence or the people that are a science-based profession, regulated profession like dietitians, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, but it is for a purpose. We can't necessarily market ourselves or talk about our how we operate or what we can do for people in the same way, because if it's not evidence based, then the extension to that is it's not an ethical approach to communicating about our services, and then it just kind of goes from there. So it's ultimately what the regulations we have in place in order to make sure that we aren't doing that is to protect the public, because I think the one thing is that at least with that series, this is a good example of it. It starts off really awesome, like, and even myself, I'm like, oh, this sounds pretty cool, yeah. And then the more you get into it, the more it's kind of it's kind of like a house of cards. But if we were to do that with all the people that we work with, I mean, that would do a lot of psychological harm to some people. You know, a lot of damage can be done, and it's very, very risky. And that the cost usually outweighs the benefits in the long term. We see from our perspective. It doesn't make us as much money as fast, though. I mean, we can't abuse any marketing tactic under the sun in order to draw people into our world, which I know is a frustrating thing. But again, it's for a purpose. But I can't. I would be lying if I said that I sat there watching this series going, man, it would be nice to not have to care about all of these rules and regulations and things, just because, look at what we could do. But that's not me saying I would do it. That's just purely in this magical world in my brain where we wouldn't have rules or anything like that, and how much easier it would be. But the easy road is not always the right road to take.
I think both of you hit on really important pieces, and I'm going to pinpoint a few of the words that you were saying, because I heard fast and sexy and more appealing and quicker. And I think that's one thing that I took from watching the series, of how quickly those types of misinformation spread, like just like wildfire, depending on what they were promoting, and how easy it was for somebody to write a book, write a blog, like all in this, how quickly, where, to your point, Brandon, when we're held to regulations, our stuff doesn't move that quick. It's not as appealing. So that was something that I took, how quickly, like wildfire, like that misinformation spreads versus evidence-based.
I think that was one part of, like, early on in the series, it was pretty clear that what probably started as like I don't know, a decently harmless claim or statements, just snowballed and just turned into something, just turned into a whole huge large thing with a large following. And it was interesting because it just kind of started small, which is probably how most things in this industry, in the wellness industry, that are can be kind of comparable to this, start out kind of small. I was talking to my friends, or I got together with a small group of people, or I had this thing happened, and then it just kind of went from there. Like it starts organically, which a lot of people like and resonate with an organic grassroots kind of story, but it as it turns out isn't always factual. Yet I don't think that ultimately matters at the end of the day, because it all sounds cool, draws people in. I mean, that is doing what it's supposed to, whether people know it or not. It's not right, but it is doing what it's supposed to in that moment.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to also note that, for context, if people haven't watched the Netflix series, this was the main character, Belle Gibson. She basically had lied about a cancer diagnosis and said she had, I think it was like 6 weeks or a couple of months to live, but she had sort of healed herself through nutrition and lifestyle and things like that. And so this was also a bit of a sign of the times, I think, because it happened back 2015-ish, where Instagram was just becoming a thing. So it's interesting to note, because at that point, the the market or the media was so not even close to as saturated with kind of like the misinformation as it is now. So maybe that contributed to it kind of spreading so much because it was sort of a new idea, something very hopeful. It was like a really cool story that sort of started to gain traction. Um, but also interesting to note because there's so many pieces or stories out there that may or may not be true nowadays that I think we're bombarded with in media today. So, yeah, just interesting to see how things like that gain traction and if we've improved or not in today's world. I'm not even sure.
I think it's a status symbol too, like to an extent, like with something changing like that in at that time point. Like we see that pretty much anything in the media world where there's a new tool, a new platform, a new way of communicating, a new way of presenting information comes along, and the people that are usually there first become kind of the in some small area, be it just a small town or a corner of the internet with like a few hundred followers, all the way up to like tens thousands or whatever else. Like they become a trusted voice for really no reason other than they're building a community. They're there in front of you. It's there. So it's very uh, tempting to want to just immediately trust people that are there because why would they lie to me? Why would they lead me down the wrong path? Like they seem like they're very cool humans. I would go for coffee with them. That why would they want to do any of these things? And and it so it definitely speaks to how anybody that's consuming information anywhere, I mean, this would kind of affect us, but you can't always trust everything that you're seeing online, no matter where it comes from or what new thing is going on or whatever else, because you never know. Now, I would say trust us, but I mean, ultimately, broad stroke, you gotta be critical in how you consume information.
Let's go into these next pieces then, because it kind of does talk about a little bit of like trust and definitely some of the theme. I mean, with Belle Gibson, and a lot of the show was really on cancer and nutrition and different therapies. And there was kind of the built on, okay, well, not trusting, say, what would be considered traditional medicine and the alternative pieces. And, as dietitians, we do still see or get asked a lot about these alternative medicines for other areas of health. So I'm kind of curious, maybe Brandon and Laura, to point out maybe like one of the maybe therapies in there that you can speak to, or kind of maybe, yeah, what would be the harm, say, of somebody doing something like, I don't know, the coffee enema one really stuck out to me, but for many different reasons. But yeah, maybe ones that stuck out to you and kind of why it could be harmful, some of these things that we were seeing portrayed too.
I'm very happy to comment on the coffee enema thing and stuff like that. Um, in the show, it was actually one of the other characters in it, Mila, who actually had a kind of rare cancer diagnosis, and she decided to not go with the conventional treatment route, um, and went with what they call in the show Hirsch therapy. Um, but I believe it was based off of Gerson therapy, which, like, from what I remember, like, I had heard about it quite a while back, like 10 years ago, it would have been quite a popular thing. And it's also interesting to hear the trends that kind of happen with alternative medicine, because the Gerson therapy was really focused on, at least on the nutrition side of things, like juicing and kind of detoxifying the body, or like vegan and vegetarian sort of diets. Um, Really focusing on kind of, yeah, the micronutrients and like flushing things through you, stuff like that, um, which sounds kind of science based. And um, there is, I struggle to say this, maybe some science to say that it was loosely based on, but not even really. Um, Essentially, it was looking at, I think, replacing sodium or something in the body, and that was thought of as a mechanism to cure cancer. But where it started was somebody who made up the diet and um, treatment sort of protocol to treat his migraines. And then he just decided, oh, this can treat everything. So let's give it to cancer patients. That'll work for sure. And then again, part of it was I think it's daily, a couple of times a day, coffee enemas or chamomile tea enemas. So there are risks to that. Absolutely, doing that many times. Um, Within a day can definitely be risky. There's also the risk of malnutrition if you're solely just having juice in the day. You could be very low in energy, especially at a time when you are dealing with a cancer diagnosis. Your metabolism can definitely be affected. We would be at risk of potentially extreme weight loss and muscle loss. So there's lots of risks to things like that. And the major thing is no evidence to prove that it has actually improved outcomes, um, even with or alongside regular treatment. There's unfortunately just no evidence for it. So debunked, essentially, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces in the way that you describe that, Laura, is for me, um, a lot of the things in this series for treatments like the ones that you mentioned, they have a theoretical basis, and you kind of alluded to that. There's mechanisms in the body, like with how our body works and our physiology, that a lot of treatments, and this even spreads to like supplementation and in any respect in the nutrition space, wherein there's a certain pathway in the body or there's a certain function in the body that is affected by a state like a cancer or whatever other chronic disease or whatever other condition. And if we kind of supercharge that function or pathway in the body, or if we just kind of help it along using other mechanisms or treatments, like enemas or IV nutrition therapy or juicing, or just flood the body with all the things that it uses for these other pathways, be it energy metabolism or detoxification or anything like that, then in theory it should help all of these things. And it sounds very believable. Like if I do more of that thing in the body, theoretically it should help it, right? And this is the thing that people latch onto when they're selling these types of interventions and treatments, because there is a scientific element to it. It's an invalid use of that scientific element. You can't just look at a mechanism and then say, oh, if I just flood it with that thing that's having this effect, then all these other effects are going to happen. Like you might need to stretch and limber up before you make that leap, because it's a pretty big leap. And oftentimes that's where we say it's not evidence based. We're not saying that. Well, actually, we kind of are saying that it's not appropriate. It's not accurate way of going about it, and it's pretty much the basis of a lot of these types of treatments, I would say, unfortunately.
Yeah, I wanted to also point out a quick red flag that in retrospect you can kind of see, okay, are we really getting at something that's evidence based? When I said that there was like that trend back in 2014, 2015, it was really big to do juicing and the liver detoxing, things like that. Nowadays, you might have heard now keto or the carnivore diet is the big thing. So it's kind of swung in the complete opposite direction. So if both of those things are supposed to cure everything and make literally everything better, even though they have some sort of science to back them or a theory behind them. Just think about it for 2 seconds. If these are two opposite, completely different things, are they both going to get you the same result all the time just because we say it is? No.
If only it was that simple. It would be so easy.
Well, this maybe kind of leads actually really nicely into kind of the next piece of like, how do we know then? So, if we've got this kind of theory of things that could be potentially, right? Like, not saying there's something there with it, and we've got different sides saying this, oh, this is actually for this. Like, how do we make sense of it? Like, what, this is a lot to figure out for people who aren't, say, looking at research papers all the time or digging into the science behind it. So, as a consumer, or I don't know what the word is for watching social media piece, but yeah, how do we go about figuring this out then?
Good question. Couple ways you can tackle it. We have a couple of resources available for this. Because it's okay to have theories and it's okay to read things out there. If you're interested in, improving your health or you have this kind of wellness interest, that's a good thing. That's not something to be ashamed of by any means, but just acknowledging and becoming aware that there is so much misinformation out there. How do you tackle it? How do you identify it? And where do you go to fact check to get the correct information and make sure that you're following something that's going to be beneficial and not harmful to you? So we, of course, do have our blog on identifying misinformation and our podcast that we did on the same topic. Um, so that's really identifying some of the red flags that you can see in misinformation in the media today. And we can touch a little bit on that, but that's kind of one of the major ones that I like to refer people to. But also, if you have a lot of nutrition questions and really want to get to the root of what's the misinformation out there, what's right for me, then that is what we as registered dietitians are actually here for, to do that kind of one-on-one counseling. Again, some of these things might be right for you, or you can approach things on the side of like complementary medicine. So following things that are truthful, evidence based. But if there is that interest in some of these, alternative options, it's just weighing the cost or the potential risk versus the benefits and making you aware of all of that, because ultimately you are your own person and you make your own choices about your health. But we're just there for you essentially to give you the evidence, give you the science that's actually there for it, and help you make an informed choice for sure.
Yeah, I love that, Laura. I think anytime this space for a lot of people is very emotionally driven, and people would take advantage of that whether they know it or not. So if you find yourself um, if you find yourself being a person or are a person that is susceptible to these types of things, if you label yourself as gullible or somebody has labeled you as gullible, that's not a shot. That's just to say that there's things going on in your mind that make you more susceptible to these types of messages potentially. And being aware of that means that you can find ways of uh, putting things in place so that you don't become as susceptible to them in some way. Like running ideas past somebody you trust that actually has a background and is trained in the area that is whatever area that you're looking at. Like Laura mentioned, we're dietitians. This is our specialty, talking about nutrition and lifestyle and its effect on health. And we're going to be as unbiased as we can in this process and put your interest top of mind. We're not going to go at it from some weird ulterior motive. But it's being aware of that can be huge, because then you can kind of put a safety net in place, or be aware of somebody's unintentionally or maybe intentionally trying to manipulate you in some way, shape, or form. But one thing, Laura, that you mentioned that I think is good to know is if people can use some of these therapies that maybe don't have as strong of evidence but are exploratory, but don't have a super clear indication that they're harmful, then that's where those temptations can come from. Like, oh, it doesn't seem dangerous, why not give it a go? But if those things come at the expense of proven evidence-based treatments that are at least closely proven in most cases to have an effect of some sort on whatever condition that you're looking at, that's where the real danger comes in, is where unproven therapies that don't have a solid evidence base start to displace the ones that do. That's where things get really dicey. And then I think this series definitely was a good example of that for Millie. I think if I'm remembering the series correctly, that's kind of something that happened, because then enough time goes by when stuff gets real, and in her case it was too late. to start the evidence-based proven treatments because things were too far along. So don't let it displace the proven things, or if people are trying to make you let go of the proven evidence-based treatments for some reason. I don't want to get down all the conspiracy theory route, but it is true. That's what sometimes happens. People use those arguments to try and oh, that's okay. You don't need to go do that. We're fine. We'll take care of you. Like it's manipulative, but it is real and it happens. And so being aware of that type of a thing can make sure that you're putting your own interest in health first, whatever that looks like.
I think that also brings a good point, and something that as I was watching, and both of you kind of touched on this, is when they did try to express this to their specialists or people who were involved in their care, there was, well, maybe it's more for dramatic effect or how it was approached, it is they were shut down immediately. Like, there was no even conversation. When I think about what we do with practice and with our clients, it's a very open dialogue and trust. And yeah, I don't want you to feel ashamed if you're thinking about this. Let's talk about it. Like, let's work through that. And that's part of, I think, having a good support health team is, surrounding yourself by people who, will listen, who will walk through, without, that bias around, oh, you shouldn't just do it, right? Like, that there's a good conversation around it. And because it was coming across of a lot of mistrust of conventional medicine. And when you're not being heard, that then all of a sudden lures people out of that space and more into alternative therapies too. But there is a place for both if both are approached well and thoughtfully, in forms of monitoring and measuring if going down that road.
I think too, that's my whole sort of thing is I'm going to be the first person to tell you that nutrition can play a role in cancer care for sure. It's just establishing what that actually means, and we're not fighting against the conventional treatments per se. We're using nutrition to improve your quality of life, to help you through treatments, to kind of guide you along your journey, whatever it is that you choose. But yeah, we're not trying to cause any mistrust or anything like that. And I think that's really where um, big choices are made, is when there's that mistrust created, whether it's on the side of alternative medicine or in conventional healthcare. Just that act of, probably feeling a little bit dismissed, feeling like people are going against what you value and what you are thinking, that causes you to look elsewhere for alternative health. So that's a big thing to mention there, that, yeah, there is space for both of those. Absolutely. And something that I advocate for all the time. So let's move away from that misconception if it is out there for sure.
One might say that it grinds your gears. Is that a fair statement?
Does grind my gears. Yes, you're correct.
Okay, good. Any other thoughts on kind of the debunking of it, or before we kind of, learn how to move forward with this? But yeah, anything else you want to debunk or demyth that from that series?
I mean, the only other thing I can think of is I was expecting a lot more conversation about apple cider vinegar. Um, but that was, yeah.
Well, once we get started, we'll never stop. So I don't know how far you want to get into it.
Maybe, Brandon, you should go down that route we'll hold you to it, because I was expecting the same thing. Apple cider vinegar, honestly, is one, and I think it's named for that. It's just one of those things that have been around. Like, you use it for everything, on everything, to fix everything under the sun. It's still a very prevalent form of alternative therapy that has been hanging on. So yeah, Brandon, maybe go down that road a little bit.
I don't remember. Did the series even bring up apple cider vinegar at some point,
For
or
2 minutes,
for
one
two?
little scene, yeah.
Oh, what was it? I can't remember. Do you remember?
You know what? She was drinking it for tapeworm, which is funny because that's one of the things we hear a lot. And the terminology that will be used in that space is flushing out. It's getting the toxins out. And I believe it was something of trying to get whatever type of parasite or something out. So that's what there was a chunk in there too. Somebody drank it and then it was gone.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, because like I wasn't led down the a different path of what the actual series was going to be about, because I know the background of apple cider vinegar being for some a cure all for all these things. I'm pretty sure apple cider vinegar like capsules are still sold at stores as well nowadays, even in 2025. But yeah, I was like, oh, this is going to be just about a bunch of like bunk and false claims and like rawing like treatments that don't have a basis, and it ended up being that, just not apple cider vinegar. So I can totally see how it was named that kind of symbolically. Although I mean, I was curious like throughout the whole thing. I'm like, yeah, I probably now that you two mentioned where the apple cider vinegar part came in, I was probably like, oh, there it is, finally. But and then not hearing much of it afterwards. But I kind of got it by that point. I'm like, oh, I see the connection. There's apple cider vinegar here. I mean, it balances the flavor profile of salad dressings very well. So, I mean, that's a good thing. Yeah, 100%. Wouldn't consume it straight on its own for a long period of time unless you want to see your enamel on your teeth go away magically. Or acidic burns in your esophagus, also a thing. Not fun.
You know what I've heard before is that apple cider vinegar is a cure for acid reflux. So that makes sense. Throw in some more acid there, yeah.
It also does show up in the chronic disease world, but actually kind of how we've talked about today, like there's like the underlying, yeah, things that make theoretical sense is around acid. Having it with the meal helps with postprandial blood sugars or after meal blood sugar. So it is actually a form of an evidence base because we're using acidic to lower the blood sugars, but not always just with apple cider vinegar, but mostly it's used as a salad dressing or like lemon, the same kind of thing. But yeah, there is a little bit of evidence there for it for sure.
Let's just make giant leaps everywhere else, though, just for fun, because we can.
Yeah, major disclaimer, do not chug apple cider vinegar.
No. And
Salad dressing, fine. Shots, not fine.
I've also heard for hiccups, and I'm going to be totally transparent. I have attempted it before. It's terrible. It doesn't help with hiccups. I think it made it worse. But yeah, I have been in a situation where drink this for hiccups. So I think too, pointing out that all of us probably actually at some point get caught up in a little bit for these things, either wanting to try or see how it works, or I mean, yeah, there you go. It doesn't help with hiccups.
I mean, a shot of apple cider vinegar probably feels like a slap in the face surprise. Like, people try to like surprise people to try and get their hiccups to go away. But like, I feel like a shot of apple cider vinegar could maybe be that. But that's a stretch, man.
But this I think is a very good example of something like, they talk about like old wives' tales or whatever things have been passed down of, right? Like, no, hiccups, it just opens casually. I find nutrition conversations just happen very casually with you're out with friends or whatever. And I'm like, no, like you don't drink the apple cider. You have to spin upside down 3 times on your head to get rid of hiccups. Try that instead. Or, drinking a glass of milk while you're standing on one foot. Like that's how quickly all of a sudden a casual conversation can end up down misinformation. Like it's not intend to be harm. It's like, oh, I heard this from a person who heard this and heard this. But yeah, totally. I'm going to go try to stand on my head and see what works.
Run face first into a wall. That might help. I don't know. Don't do that.
Yeah. Okay, so after watching this everything we've kind of talked about today, any last kind of closing thoughts, anything we should, as a listener, probably a lot of people are going to maybe go watch it after listening to this, but yeah, any lessons moving forward or any kind of last thoughts we should end with?
Yeah, I got none. If you haven't watched it and you're curious now, and you have a Netflix subscription, go have a watch. It's a series. It's pretty easy to consume in probably about a week or so, depending on how often you like to watch those types of things. But yeah, and then come back and rewatch some of our stuff and see if you agree with any of it.
You know, it would be so fun is if we made a little bingo card for apple cider vinegar, finding all the little like misinformation, like check it off for this piece, check it off for that piece, send in your results. It's a thought.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, bingo, apple cider vinegar bingo.
Mm-hmm.
Can you use apple cider vinegar as your dabber on the card?
Ah, that's a good thing. Yeah. Would recommend. Wouldn't work otherwise.
Yeah. If you're looking for uses of apple cider vinegar that don't involve shots, then a bingo dabber might work. I don't know. I have no clue. I'm just making stuff up now.
Cotton ball, dip it in the apple cider vinegar.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yep. And you have like ink on the page or something that changes color based on it's an acid touching it.
Yeah. Okay, we got a whole product that we need to market now. So
yeah, you guys clearly have thought a lot about all the uses.
I really haven't.
It's easy how quickly we come though. But this has been a good conversation. I think both of you had a good point. If you do end up watching it, come back. We do want to hear if you watched it, like what are some of the things that maybe you found interesting or had heard of, because we'd love to be able to speak to that too in other episodes. If there's something that you're kind of curious about too, we're happy to always hear from you and listen. But yeah, both of you had kind of touched on, we do have other podcasts on this and blogs on this that we will kind of link as well to continue this conversation. But I want to thank you both for joining today on kind of a fun topic. We don't often get to talk about TV shows in a nutrition as dietitian space. So I think this allowed us to enter this quite well. And yeah, thank you both for joining. And if you found this helpful, please share, please spread this information to other people. That would be awesome. And yeah, hopefully everybody tunes in next time. Have a great day.
Bye.